with legal analyst Joe Tamburino, who's been following the trial from the beginning. Joe, I want to pick up on that point. It's interesting how in other cases, well, first of all, it's very unusual for a police officer to be charged in a case like this, let alone convicted. But often juries would defer to the fact that officers had a certain kind of training, and even if they did something that felt gross or offensive or against the Constitution, you would defer to the training. In this case, the jury said, we don't care what the training is. This is your obligation as a human being and under the law.
That's correct. And that's what's perplexing about this and quite unique, because there was so much evidence about training. What was trained, what was not trained, what was received, especially by the rookies, Mr. Lane and Mr. King. But when it came down to it, the jury obviously said, regardless of training, we think based on common sense, we presume this is what should have happened. But it is confusing.
When this happens in the future, if this happens in the future, does this change whether or not officers would be charged for not doing something? And not only charged, but, you know, convicted? Are we seeing a shift in what juries are deciding here and what the public is deciding?
Yes, there's a few things with that. First, in the future, will officers now be worried that not only do they have to look out for their own safety and the safety of the people that they're encountering, but will they also have to, at the same time, look at what their partners are doing, because now they have an obligation almost to monitor them. Second, if they do that, will that take their eyes off what's happening around them? Meaning that, will it be even a more dangerous situation? And lastly, what would the effect of all of that be on policing? Will policing recruits go down? Will less people want to get into the law enforcement profession? And these are all important questions.
I mean, in fairness, though, Joe, this case is so different. What Derek Chauvin did is so egregious. This is not the same as some of those kind of split-second decision cases where I think juries still struggle with what the right thing or what the legal obligation is. This one went on so long. Do you think that factored into the way the jury analyzed this? It wasn't like these other officers only had a minute. They had 8, 9 minutes to do something.
Yes, and that's where the common sense could have come in. What Mr. Chauvin did, he was convicted and he pled guilty in federal court. These other 3 officers were in a different position. But again, you know, in the end, they being the jury, had 39 pages of instructions. They obviously went over them and found that the bottom line is that the officer should have done something.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what do you think happens now? What kind of sentence might these 3 get?
Well, sentencing probably won't happen for about 3 months. They'll have to go through a pre-sentence investigation. They'll be interviewed by probation. Their families and friends will be interviewed. And then we also have the state's case. But the sentencing here could be anything from, say, a year up to life. Now, it's not going to be life because Mr. Chauvin is going to get between 20 and 24 years. So we would presume these officers would get definitely less than 20 years. But it's entirely up to the judge.
You mentioned that state trial that's scheduled for this summer. Do you think now that they'll try and have a plea?
Well, they very well could, because think of it this way. Mr. Chauvin was convicted in state court, and then when the federal charges happened, he worked out a plea bargain so that he could get a package deal, so to say. The same thing could happen here, where in the federal trial there's a conviction, and with the state trial coming up, they can try to work out a deal. Or the state trial could be moved, delayed, just to see what happens with federal sentencing first.
All right, Joe Tamburino, lots to watch going forward. Big case. Unprecedented for sure. Thanks, Joe. Lots more to come. As Joe indicated, as Heather asked, we will cover it every step of the way, bringing you details as they break on TV, online, and streaming on CBS News Minnesota.